Hello everyone, welcome to Frightful Whispers. I'm here to guide you into the shadows tonight. I know you're using this video to unwind and drift off to sleep. So, before we begin, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Where are you watching from? And what time is it for you? Now, get cozy, relax, and let the whispers of the night take over. I can still hear the relentless crash of the waves, their mournful roar against the rocky shore. The boat cut through the water with a soft creak, a sound almost swallowed by the howling wind that slapped my face. Salt stung my skin as the sea sprayed up, sending chills straight through me. The world felt vast, so vast it almost swallowed me whole. I gripped the boat's helm, my knuckles white from the force of my grip, trying to ignore the unease curling in my gut. The open water was quiet, eerie. It wasn't the calm I was used to, it was something worse. I had heard the stories, of course. Every sailor did. The cursed lighthouse, perched on that forsaken island, had claimed every keeper who dared step foot there. Some said the light turned on by itself at night, as if calling to them, guiding them straight into madness. Others said the island itself was alive with some dark force that wouldn't let go. I didn't believe it, not at first. I was just a man looking for a fresh start. The sea had already taken so much from me. But when I saw that job posted, lighthouse keeper on the abandoned island, I thought maybe, just maybe, this was the chance to leave my past behind. What could go wrong? The island loomed before me, a dark, jagged silhouette against the overcast sky. The lighthouse itself stood tall, almost mocking me with its twisted black and white stripes. It was nothing like the lighthouses I had known before. This one looked older, as if it had been left to rot long ago, forgotten by time. The sea around it churned restlessly, as though the waves didn't want anyone to get close. The wind grew stronger, tugging at my coat, and I swear I could hear whispers carried by the breeze. It was nothing, I told myself. Nothing but the sea messing with my head. I docked the boat, the old wood creaking underfoot as I stepped onto the slippery planks. The island felt wrong. I couldn't explain it. Maybe it was the silence, the kind of silence that makes your skin crawl. No birds, no animals, not even the wind seemed to be breathing the same air as me. Just the constant crashing of the waves below, as if the ocean itself were speaking in some forgotten language. It didn't feel like a place for living things. It felt empty. I looked up toward the lighthouse, the towering structure casting a long shadow across the island. The path leading to it was narrow and treacherous, rocks jutting out at odd angles, and the earth seemed unstable, like it had been eroding for centuries. With every step, it felt as if the ground itself was testing me, holding its breath, waiting. Maybe it was the isolation playing tricks on my mind, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me. I forced myself to ignore it and pressed on, my boots crunching against the rocky terrain. When I finally reached the base of the lighthouse, I paused, looking up at it. The wind had picked up again, a violent gust tearing at my jacket as I stood there, staring up at the grim tower. It was taller than I had expected, the stone cracked and weathered, and the paint on the walls chipped and faded. Time had ravaged this place. I almost expected it to collapse any minute, but somehow it stood there, alone, watching. I pushed open the door. It groaned in protest, the hinges crying out in a long, tortured squeal, like it hadn't been opened in years. The air inside was thick with dust, stale and damp, carrying the scent of mildew and forgotten years. The walls seemed to close in around me, the shadows pressing closer, like the lighthouse was alive. I shook the thought away. I was here for a job, nothing more. I made my way up the spiral staircase, the wood groaning beneath me, each step a reluctant movement. The higher I climbed, the colder it got. The air felt heavier, pressing down on me as though the building itself was trying to suffocate me. The light at the top beckoned, a steady, unwavering glow cutting through the growing darkness outside. But as I reached the top, something felt off. There was an unnatural stillness in the air, a stillness that felt like a warning. I grabbed the match from my pocket, striking it against the wall. The small flame flickered to life, but before I could light the wick, the room seemed to exhale a cold breath. I froze. The light. It came on by itself. A soft hum filled the room as the lantern burst to life, casting an eerie glow across the space. The wick had ignited on its own, the flame steady and cold, its light cutting through the darkness. I stared at it, my heart pounding in my chest. I hadn't touched anything. The light had simply turned on. I stepped back, my mind racing. My first instinct was to think it was some old mechanical trick, a faulty system, a fluke. But deep down, I knew it wasn't that simple. I felt watched. The shadows stretched in odd directions, creeping along the walls like they had a life of their own. The air was thick, suffocating. It pressed in from all sides, curling around me. I told myself it was nothing, just nerves. This was a lighthouse, an old, abandoned one, nothing more. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that this place had been waiting for me. The light called to me, and in that moment I realized something. I had just stepped into something far darker than I ever could have imagined. And the worst part? I hadn't even known that the real horror was still waiting. The night settled in quickly, like a heavy, suffocating blanket, wrapping the island in its cold embrace. The sky was a dull gray, the moon hidden behind thick clouds, leaving only the harsh winds and the sound of the waves crashing against the rocks to fill the air. It was the kind of silence that presses against your skin, the kind that makes your breath catch in your throat. And still, I told myself it was just nerves. After all, it was just another night in the lighthouse. Nothing more. The wind howled around the lighthouse like a living thing, a constant wild roar that never stopped. I could feel it rattling the very bones of the building, as if it wanted to tear everything apart. I couldn't escape the noise, the oppressive weight of it. It seemed to crawl under my skin and lodge itself in my brain. I tried to ignore it, but it felt like the wind was alive, whispering secrets to the walls, secrets it wouldn't share with me. Inside, the silence was even worse. It was thick, suffocating, and it wrapped itself around me like a shroud. I stepped through the creaking door and into the cold interior of the lighthouse. The air was stale, full of the smell of mildew and something older, something that had been left to rot for years. The dust hung thick in the air, swirling in the faint light from the lantern room above. The very atmosphere seemed to be holding its breath, waiting for something or someone. I climbed the staircase to the lantern room, the wooden steps groaning beneath my weight, the sound echoing like a warning through the silence. Each step was slower, heavier, as though the building itself didn't want me to reach the top. But I pushed through, one foot after the other, until I reached the room where the great light sat. And then, there it was, the lantern. I hadn't touched it yet, but the light was already flickering to life. It burned brighter, sharper than I expected, as if it had a mind of its own. A strange, unnatural glow that didn't feel like it was coming from any flame I knew. I froze. The light. It wasn't just a light. It was alive. It flickered in time with my heartbeat, casting long shadows that twisted unnaturally along the walls. shadows that seemed to reach for me, clawing at the air as if they were alive, as if they had a will of their own. The warmth of the lantern's light didn't reach me. I could feel the cold in the room, the air tightening around me. I didn't know why, but I could feel the building itself watching me. I stepped closer, my breath catching in my throat. The shadows. They weren't just shadows. They were something else. Something darker. I was alone. I had to be alone. But the whisper came then. Soft at first. Just a faint breath, almost like the wind through a cracked window. I turned, my heart pounding in my chest, but the room was empty. I blinked. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was just the wind howling through the cracks in the walls. But no, there it was again, clearer now. A low, drawn-out sigh, like the building was exhaling, like it had been holding its breath for decades. I took a step back, my hand gripping the railing of the stairs, my legs suddenly weak beneath me. Nothing. I told myself. It's nothing, but I could feel it. The air was heavier now. It was suffocating, pressing in on me. The walls seemed to shift, the shadows stretched farther than they should. I felt cold, too cold. Leave. The whisper. It was louder this time, clearer. It wasn't just a wind, it wasn't just a sound, it was a voice, cold and distant, but there, in my ear, like someone was standing right behind me. I spun around, my breath shallow, eyes wide, searching the dark corners of the room. There was no one there, nothing but the swirling shadows. The light flickered again. It wasn't like any lantern I had ever seen. It wasn't steady, it wasn't warm, it was unnatural. The shadows moved with the light, stretching longer, twisting in ways that didn't make sense. I could see them now, figures, faint and indistinct, but unmistakably there. Figures in the shadows, just out of reach, like they were waiting for something. I took a step back, but the light grew brighter, its cold beam searing through the dark like an accusing finger. My body felt heavy, like the air was thickening around me. I could hear the whisper again, but it wasn't the wind anymore. It was inside my head. Leave, leave, leave. I didn't want to listen. I didn't want to believe it. But the chill in the room was unbearable, seeping into my bones, sinking into my very soul. And then I realized. The light had turned on by itself. But it wasn't just the light, it wasn't just the shadows. The lighthouse, it was alive. It had been alive long before I had ever set foot here, and now it had me. I could feel it in the very air around me, the cold, the whispering, the light that flickered with a strange rhythm, as if responding to my every movement. It wasn't just a building, it was something older, darker, something hungry. It had waited for me, for someone. But I had made a terrible mistake. I wasn't just a keeper of the lighthouse. I was its prisoner. And there was no leaving. Not now. Not ever. The shadows closed in on me, and I could feel the walls of the lighthouse press in tighter, suffocating me, until I could no longer tell where the darkness began and the light ended. And somewhere, in the distance, the whisper came again. Leave. But it was too late. I should have turned back. I know that now. The first time I set foot in that small office to speak with Thomas Aldridge, something in the air, something about the man, felt wrong. There was a coldness to him, an edge that I couldn't place, like he was holding something back, something that shouldn't be spoken aloud. And yet, I was too focused on getting the job done, on leaving my past behind to pay any real attention. I had a mission: take the lighthouse keeper position and move on. It sounded simple enough, or so I thought. When I stepped into his office, the door creaked behind me, cutting through the silence. The small room smelled of old wood and stale paper, like nothing in it had been touched for years. Aldridge didn't greet me at first, his eyes glued to the papers in front of him, his fingers tapping rhythmically on the desk as if he were lost in thought. I could hear the wind outside, howling through the cracks of the window, as if trying to make its presence known. But inside, there was nothing but the muffled sound of his pen scratching against paper, the occasional shuffle of documents. I stood there for what felt like a small eternity, waiting for him to acknowledge me. His gaze finally lifted, but it wasn't the friendly recognition I had expected. Instead, his eyes pierced through me like daggers, sharp, calculating, as though he could see right into my soul. It made my blood run cold. "You're the new keeper at the lighthouse on the island, aren't you?" Aldridge's voice broke the silence. It was steady, controlled, but there was an undercurrent of something darker, something hidden. "Yeah, that's me," I said, trying to shrug it off, keeping my voice casual. "I got the job a couple of weeks ago. It's a simple enough gig, I figure. Keep the light running, make sure everything's in order." Aldridge didn't respond right away. He only stared at me, his hands folded on the desk as if weighing something in his mind. Then, without warning, his expression shifted, just a little. His eyes narrowed, and I saw something flicker behind them, something almost afraid. "You've been told to leave before the full moon, haven't you?" he asked suddenly, his voice low and quiet. It wasn't a question, it was a command, a statement of fact. My brow furrowed. No one mentioned anything about the full moon. I couldn't help but laugh a little, though it was nervous and hollow. "I'm just here to do my job, like anyone else. I don't believe in ghost stories or curses or any of that stuff." Aldridge's face didn't shift. He didn't smile, didn't laugh. He just watched me, as if my words meant nothing. The air in the room grew heavier, the wind outside howling louder, as if the world itself was trying to push me toward something, trying to get me to understand something I wasn't seeing. And then he leaned forward, his voice dropping even lower, almost a whisper. "You don't understand, Rhodes," Aldridge said, his words slow, deliberate, like each one carried the weight of years of regret. "The lighthouse isn't like any other. The island isn't like any other. It's cursed. The keepers, every single one of them, they've all vanished. No one knows how, no one knows why. But they always disappear. And the light, it turns on by itself. It calls to you. It makes you stay." I was about to laugh it off, to tell him to stop being dramatic, but something in the way he said it stopped me. There was no joke in his eyes, no cynicism. There was only a raw, biting fear that gripped him and twisted his features. The kind of fear that can't be faked. Aldridge's gaze turned distant, as if lost in a memory. "You think it's just an island, just a job. But it's not. It's a trap. The island, it doesn't let go. And if you stay past the full moon, you'll never leave, not like the others." The room grew even colder. I could see my breath fogging in the air, and the hairs on my neck stood up like little soldiers, their senses alert to a danger I couldn't see. "What do you mean, I'll never leave?" I asked, my voice tight, the edge of skepticism barely holding on. "What's going on there? It's just a lighthouse, just an old job." Aldridge's eyes sharpened, and for a moment, I saw a flicker of something dark and bitter. "You don't know. You think you do, but you don't." I didn't believe it either when I first heard the stories. But then, I saw it. I saw the light. I saw the keepers vanish, and I've seen it happen again and again, Rhodes. It's not a lighthouse, it's something older. It pulls you in, the light, the island. It doesn't care who you are, where you come from, or what you believe. It only cares that you stay. His words were a chilling knot in my stomach, and the quiet that followed felt like a suffocating weight pressing down on me. I tried to dismiss it, tried to chalk it up to superstition and old folklore, but deep down, something gnawed at me. Something deep in my gut told me this wasn't a joke. "The full moon," Aldridge continued, his voice almost trembling now. "That's when it gets worse. When the light changes, the island shifts, and if you don't leave before it's full, you'll be trapped, like all the others." I felt a cold sweat running down my back, the silence between us growing unbearable. My mind screamed for logic, for reason, but Aldridge's words rang in my ears, louder than any rational thought. "You're not just taking a job," Aldridge whispered, the weight of his words sinking in with a sickening finality. "You're becoming part of it. The lighthouse isn't something you control, Rhodes. It controls you. It's always been this way, and you'll never leave." I stood there, frozen, my mouth dry, my mind a mess of disbelief and dread. You're telling me to just leave? To give up the job and go?" He looked at me, his expression a mixture of pity and dread. "I can't tell you what to do, but if you stay after the full moon, you'll understand. And it will be too late." His words hung in the air, suffocating me, choking out the last remnants of my skepticism. I left his office that day, but I didn't leave the warning behind. It followed me. Every step I took. And now, as I stood on that cursed island, I knew what I had ignored. The light. It had already started to call, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. I had already sealed my fate. The lighthouse was waiting for me. The second night on the island was when I began to feel it. The weight of the place, the heaviness in the air, the suffocating presence that pressed in on me from every angle. I had told myself it was just the isolation, just the creeping chill of being so far removed from the world. But something about this place, this lighthouse, was different. The wind outside was unrelenting. It howled through the cracks in the stone walls, sending shivers through me as I moved about the lighthouse, checking everything. The sound of the wind was deafening, like a voice, mournful, calling out to me from the depths of the sea. I'd been a sailor, used to the ocean's moods, but this was something else. It wasn't just the wind. It was like the very island itself was alive, as if it had a pulse, a heartbeat that I could feel in the floorboards beneath my boots. I went up to the lantern room again, my hands stiff with unease. The steps groaned under my weight as I ascended the narrow, spiraling staircase, each footfall echoing like a warning. The higher I climbed, the colder it got. It wasn't just the temperature, it was something else. A chill that seeped into my bones, settling in deep, refusing to let go. The walls of the lighthouse seemed to close in, as if they were pressing down on me, tightening the air, making it harder to breathe. When I reached the top, I had to force myself to step into the lantern room. The light was already on, flickering wildly, throwing long, jagged shadows across the walls. I hadn't touched it. The light flared up by itself, casting an unnatural glow that made everything seem wrong. The shadows stretched longer than they should, twisting in ways that didn't make sense. They weren't just shadows. They were something else. They moved, they shifted, as if they were alive, waiting for me to notice them. I stepped closer to the lantern, my heart pounding, my breath shallow. But before I could reach it, I heard it, a faint whisper. I stopped dead in my tracks, straining to hear it. It was so quiet at first, so faint. I almost thought I imagined it. But no, there it was again, a voice, soft and distant, carried by the wind. It didn't make any sense. No one else was here, no one could be. I was alone. I turned in every direction, but the room was empty. The light flickered again, casting the shadows into even more unnatural shapes, stretching them across the walls and ceiling like they were alive. My eyes darted around, and then, for a moment, just a brief moment, I saw it. Movement in the corner of my eye. I whipped my head toward it, but there was nothing. Nothing but the cold, empty room. I tried to tell myself it was just the wind again, just the flickering light playing tricks on my mind. But as I stood there, the whisper came again, louder this time. It was as if it was in the room with me, not from outside, not from the wind, but from within the very walls of the lighthouse itself. The hair on the back of my neck stood on end, and I could feel the cold creeping in deeper into my very bones. "Leave!" The whisper was clearer now. My pulse quickened. My throat went dry. I turned, looking desperately for the source, but the room was still empty, save for the eerie light and the twisted shadows that seemed to shift and writhe in ways that shouldn't be possible. I tried to take a step toward the door, but my legs felt heavy, like I was moving through water. I couldn't breathe. The air in the room was thick, as though the very walls were closing in around me. I took another step, but then the light flickered again. This time, it didn't just flicker. It flickered in rhythm with my heartbeat, pulsing, faster and faster, until the shadows stretched to impossible lengths, distorting the room into something unrecognizable. My hand shot out to steady myself, my fingers brushing against the cold stone of the wall, and then, out of the corner of my eye, movement again. A figure. But it wasn't just a figure. It was something darker, something wrong. I couldn't make out the details, just the shape, the silhouette of someone, or something, lurking just outside the light. My breath caught in my throat, my heart hammering in my chest. It wasn't real, it couldn't be real, but it was real. I could feel it, the presence, the oppressive weight of something alive, something watching. My feet took me backward, step by trembling step, as I moved toward the door. The whisper came again, louder now, more urgent. "Leave, leave, leave." It wasn't just one voice anymore. It was a chorus, overlapping, coming from all directions, from the walls, from the air, from the shadows themselves. The room felt like it was closing in on me. The light flickered faster, erratically, as if it were a heartbeat, the lighthouse's heartbeat. The shadows swirled, creeping toward me, and I couldn't move fast enough, couldn't escape. I stumbled, my hand fumbling for the door handle, and just as I yanked it open, the light went out, snuffed out, leaving me in a suffocating darkness. And that's when I realized the light didn't go out on its own. I hadn't turned it off. It left me in the dark on purpose. The whispers stopped. The wind outside was silent. The shadows, gone. The lighthouse had changed. The very air around me had shifted. The building, the island, they were waiting for me to make a mistake. I took a deep breath, but it did nothing to steady me. I had heard the stories, the warnings from Aldridge, but I hadn't believed them. I thought they were just tales, just superstition. But I knew now. The lighthouse wasn't a building. It wasn't just some old structure left to rot. It was something alive, and it was hungry. I could feel it in my bones. The darkness wasn't just the absence of light, it was the absence of escape, and I had made the mistake of staying too long. Now, the lighthouse had me. It wasn't letting go. The first time I saw my name in that logbook, I didn't understand what it meant. The ink was faded, the paper brittle, and I thought it must have been some mistake, some cruel twist of fate. Daniel Rhodes, keeper of the lighthouse, 1904. I had seen it, and for a brief moment I wondered if I had somehow gone mad. My heart pounded as I stared at the entry, but something inside me, deep in my gut, told me that it wasn't a mistake. That's when the suffocating truth started to creep in, inch by inch. I hadn't been here before, right? I hadn't even heard of this place before I was given the job. I had come to the island to escape my past, to put the mistakes of my life behind me. I was just a man looking for peace. Something simple, something I could control. But as I sat there, my fingers trembling on the page, I began to realize that the lighthouse, this cursed, lonely place, had been waiting for me. And worse still, I had been waiting for it too. The air around me grew thick, suffocating. My breath quickened as my eyes darted from the logbook to the walls, to the shadows creeping in the corners of the room. I could feel them watching me, the others. The keepers who had come before me. They were here. The place that had claimed them had always been waiting for me. I slammed the book shut, my head spinning as I tried to stand. I needed air. I needed to escape this suffocating room that felt like it was closing in on me. The light flickered in the corner of my eye, its cold, pulsating glow casting long, ghostly shadows across the room. The shadows stretched, twisted, as though they were alive, reaching for me, urging me to understand. The light. It had always been this way. I stumbled out of the room, trying to make sense of it, trying to ignore the gnawing feeling in my chest that had become a full-fledged panic. The whispers were louder now, growing in intensity, in frequency, filling the very air with their cold, unyielding presence. They weren't the wind. They weren't a figment of my imagination. They were real. "You've always been the keeper." The words were soft at first, just a faint echo in the back of my mind, but then they grew louder, sharper, as if the walls themselves were speaking, as if the lighthouse had a voice. I pressed my hands to my ears, but the voice wouldn't stop. It was in my head, in my bones, in the very marrow of my soul. I couldn't escape it. It wouldn't let me. I rushed through the winding halls of the lighthouse, my footsteps pounding against the old wood. The walls groaned in response, and for the first time since I arrived, I felt the full weight of the place. The weight of something ancient pressing down on me. The lighthouse was alive, a twisted, sentient thing, and I had been chosen. The full moon was rising, and I had no choice but to face the horrifying truth. I stumbled into the lantern room, the wind howling outside, the waves crashing violently against the cliffs below. The light flickered wildly, casting chaotic shadows that danced across the walls. The air was thick with an unnatural cold, and the whispers came again, louder this time, as if the entire island had come to life. The floor seemed to tremble beneath me, as if the very earth was shifting, ready to swallow me whole. The walls were closing in. "You've always been the keeper." The voice echoed, and the room blurred before my eyes. The lighthouse was not just a job, it was a curse. The light had called to me, pulled me in. And now, as I stood there in the middle of the lantern room, I realized with cold certainty that it had always been this way. I had always been here. I had always been the keeper. Every name in that logbook, it wasn't just a record of the past. It was a record of me. I wasn't some man who had stumbled across this place by accident. I had been here before, and before that, I wasn't a newcomer. I wasn't even a man anymore. I was just part of the cycle, a cog in the lighthouse's endless, cursed rotation. Every keeper, every soul who had ever entered this island had been bound to it. And now, it was my turn to forget, to be swallowed by the light and the shadows. "You've always been the keeper." The light flared to life, blinding me with its cold, unnatural brilliance. I could hear the sound of the waves crashing against the rocks below, but they were distant now, muffled, as if the world outside didn't matter anymore. The shadows on the walls grew longer, stretching toward me, pulling me in. I could hear the whispers growing louder, not just in my ears but in my mind, in my soul. I tried to scream, but no sound came. The lighthouse had stolen my voice, stolen everything from me. I was no longer a man with a past, no longer someone who could leave. I was part of the island now, part of the cycle. I had always been the keeper, and I would always be the keeper. The light burned brighter, the shadows closed in, and the whispers, those cold, relentless whispers, filled my mind until there was nothing else. The island was my home now, the lighthouse was my prison, and the cycle would begin again, forever. I wish I could say the descent into madness happened slowly, that it crept up on me, allowing me to brace myself. But it didn't. It was sudden, an avalanche of realization that buried me whole, and when it hit, I couldn't escape. The moment I truly understood what had happened to me, to all the keepers before me, I knew I was lost. And in that instant, I felt the walls of the lighthouse close in, suffocating me with the weight of its ancient curse. It began with the whispers. At first, I had dismissed them as tricks of the wind, or my own tired mind playing games. But the longer I stayed in the lighthouse, the more they grew. Soft at first, just faint murmurs like a breeze against the window. But then, they became louder, more urgent. The very air in the lighthouse felt thick, oppressive, as if it had been waiting for me to notice, waiting for me to hear what had been there all along. The shadows on the walls began to stretch, twisting in ways that didn't make sense, pulling me in, beckoning me toward them. My eyes darted around the room, and that's when I saw it, felt it. The lighthouse itself was alive. It was breathing, pulsing with a rhythm that mirrored my heartbeat. The walls seemed to throb with the whispers, as though they were speaking directly to me, wrapping around me like a suffocating cocoon. The light flickered, casting eerie shapes across the room, and I realized that every movement, every flicker was deliberate. The light was aware. It knew I was there. It was waiting for me. I stumbled backward, my heart racing, but my legs felt like lead, too heavy to carry me. I wanted to leave. I needed to leave. But every step I took felt like I was being pulled back toward the lantern room, toward the light, as though something invisible was dragging me toward it, holding me captive in its glow. I could hear the whispers again, louder this time, their voices clamoring in my head, growing louder and more insistent. Leave. The words were cold, harsh, like they were being etched into my skull. I shook my head, trying to block them out, but they didn't stop. They never stopped. I stumbled into the lantern room, my hands trembling as I reached for the door handle. But when I stepped inside, the room felt different. The air was thicker, colder, and the light was waiting. It burned brighter now, almost painfully so, and the shadows stretched longer, distorting the space. The walls seemed to hum with an eerie energy, as though the very foundation of the lighthouse was alive with something ancient, something that had been here far longer than I had. And then I saw it. A figure, a shadow standing in the light, its form distorted, shifting, flickering like a candle flame in a storm. It was me, but it wasn't. It was my face, twisted, hollow-eyed, staring back at me from the darkness. My heart stopped. I tried to move, to run, but my body wouldn't obey. I was frozen, rooted to the spot, unable to look away from the reflection of myself in the light. The figure, it, was staring at me with hollow, empty eyes, its mouth stretching into a grin, but no sound came. "You've always been the keeper." The voice came from everywhere, from the walls, from the shadows, from the very air around me. It was a sound that clawed at my insides, scraping against my soul, ripping away at whatever sanity I had left. The light flickered again, and with it, the figure in front of me moved. It was me, but it wasn't. It reached out with twisted, skeletal hands, its smile stretching wider, as if it were inviting me in. The whispers turned into screams, an overwhelming cacophony of voices filling my ears. The walls, the shadows, the light itself, they all screamed at me. The keepers before me, the ones whose names had been written in the logbook, were all there, their voices mingling with mine. They were trapped, too. They had been just like me, and now they were gone, lost to the lighthouse's cruel, unrelenting grip. You've always been the keeper. The words were no longer whispers. They were the only thing that existed. They filled my head, my soul, until I couldn't think, couldn't breathe. I wasn't just here, I was part of the lighthouse, a part of the curse. I had always been the keeper. The light wasn't just a tool, it wasn't a beacon. It was the island's heart, its pulse, and it had been calling me back to it, again and again, every time the cycle reset. I fell to my knees, my mind shattering under the weight of the truth. The lighthouse had claimed me. It had always claimed me. I had been here before, I would be here again. The light, the shadows, the whispers, they weren't just part of the building, they were part of me. The walls closed in on me, the light flickering violently as if it were alive, as if it were feeding on my fear, on my realization. I could feel myself slipping, my thoughts dissolving, my sanity slipping away with every breath. The light was pulling me in, drawing me deeper into its embrace, into its cold, unforgiving heart. You've always been the keeper. The words echoed in my mind, deafening, overwhelming. They were me. They had always been me. And as the light surged, blinding me with its unholy glow, I realized the truth. I wasn't trapped in this lighthouse. I was the lighthouse. I had always been the keeper, and now I would never escape. The light flared, and then there was nothing. Just darkness. Just silence. And I understood. It was never meant to end. Thank you for venturing into the shadows with me here at Frightful Whispers. Remember, the darkness holds secrets, but also whispers truths to those who dare to listen. If tonight's tale sent shivers down your spine, be sure to like, share, and subscribe. It helps keep the fire of fright alive. Rest easy, but keep one eye open, for the night is never truly still. Until we meet again, stay vigilant, stay curious, and let the whispers guide you.